too. So I think this kind of education is super important for parents. So I'm really happy you guys are running this. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Austin has to say today.
Great. Thank you, Aparna.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Laura.
And I'm super excited that you have a little soccer player. So,
yes, I'll be connecting. Maybe, let's see, like that's part of my mental health too, is not to push her into doing something she doesn't want to do, but like, having good boundaries as a parent, as, the speaker last week talked about, and making sure that your kids learn about good boundaries, I think is important. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I was just talking with my Cornell soccer coach this evening, and that was some of what he was talking about, just, with the parent and athlete connection there. So he's going to be talking about that at some point soon. So I love how just, aware that you are about that now, Aparna. So glad that you're here, and I'm sure we'll be having more conversations. Would love to hear more about what you do.
I would love that, Amy. We should definitely connect.
Absolutely. All right. Carissa.
Hi.
Hi. Is that really you?
It really is. I'm not turning the video on because I'm sitting here in my pajamas with my glasses on. So, and my teenage daughter's around me, so they'll kill me if I show them on video.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, glad that you're here.
Yeah.
And Heather, welcome. And who are you connected to, Heather?
I went to school with Jenny and Chris and Carissa.
All right.
Southern Indiana representing strong here, I think.
Fabulous. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, we'll wait a couple more minutes and then we'll dive in. And Jenny, glad that you're listening in, as always.
Just your resident creeper.
Gotta have those, right? All right. So Austin, as we wait here another minute, where are you from? Where are you calling in from?
Currently in Indy. So I'm in my apartment here in Indianapolis.
Uh-oh, he froze.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay, there you go. Now you're unfrozen.
Am I good now?
You're good
okay.
now.
All right. Yeah, I'm currently in my apartment here in Indy. So if you hear noises all around, I apologize, but it can get loud here sometimes at night. I don't mind it too much. So.
All right. Again, we're so glad that you're here. All right. Well, let's go ahead and dive in.
All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Laura Bruno, and on behalf of Next Level Athlete Advantage, I want to welcome everybody that's here live and anybody that might be catching the recording later. We want to welcome you to our second part of our athlete mental health series. Tonight, we are joined by Austin Halcomb, and he is the founder of Prime Performance. He's here to talk about the 3 pillars of elite sports performance. So we'll be hearing from him shortly here. I also wanted to tell you guys a little bit about who Next Level Athlete Advantage is. Chris Swisher, Amy Snow, and I have come together because we are former collegiate athletes who saw a need for young athletes with a need for a community. All of us really, along the way somewhere, felt like we would have been so supported with a community of athletes that would have been able to bounce ideas off of, understand what we were going through when we were being recruited, even through the college process of being a student athlete, and even transitioning into real life. So one way or another, we all felt that we would have benefited from the resources that we're coming together and sharing with all of you, and a community, which is something that we're providing for young athletes as well. And so we came together and formed Next Level Athlete Advantage. So with that, I want to share a little bit about my personal journey, and then you'll hear from both Amy and Chris about kind of what brought us together, aside from the general thing that I already shared. I'm a small town athlete. I came from a very small town in Northwest Indiana. I was a multi-sport athlete, but cross country and track were my main sports. I was recruited pretty heavily out of high school. I was the first girl to go to state in any sport. So the support at my high school, as much as they tried, wasn't really, they didn't really know where to lead me. I didn't have my parents did the best that they could, but they didn't go to college. So, they were doing the best that they could, but they were a little clueless when it came to the recruiting aspects as well. So I felt like I was kind of blind going in, and I chose a Division I school that was a terrible fit for me. Eventually, it was a decision of whether I wanted to continue running or leave, and I left and transferred to a Division II school that felt like home and made my experience so much richer, and it was a great environment, and I couldn't be happier with that choice. All that to say, if I would have had that support system from the beginning, I definitely would have made a different choice to begin with. So here I am trying to make a difference and support other athletes in their choices, and help them to feel confident in what they're going into with their transitions. So next, I want to introduce my co-founder, Amy Snow, so she can share a little bit about her journey and what led her here.
Yes, hello, Amy Snow here, and I grew up in upstate New York, and I was a 2-sport athlete, played soccer and basketball all growing up and through high school. Soccer was my first love. In fact, I have a, Abby Wambach U.S. soccer, knockoff jersey on right now. But, I was a first team All-American, and I think I still hold the assist record in New York State. And I went on to play Division I soccer at Cornell University and was Rookie of the Year, was an academic All-American. And then in 2018, had the privilege of being inducted into the New York State Girls Soccer Hall of Fame. And that is something I will always treasure. And for me, one of the aspects that drew me to the school was that my coach treated me as a person first and a player second. And let me tell you, that was, out of all the different coaches I was being recruited from, he stood out because of that. And that made a huge difference in my experience. Now, for me, the major stress and anxiety came from the academic side of trying to balance being a Division I athlete, the rigors of a tough school, and just, how to manage that well. And freshman year, I would consider myself a stress ball. And I wish I'd had someone, a community like Laura was talking about, just to even kind of come alongside me in that journey, to be able to help navigate and to balance those two and have just more of a proper perspective in those days. So like Laura, to be able to come alongside young student athletes and help them in this process is such a passion of mine, and to help them transition, whether it's helping you transition from one level to the next, or from your sport to your next career, and doing so with direction and purpose. That's my passion, and I'm so thrilled to get to work alongside Chris and Laura to help you guys do that. So next up, Chris Swisher, we'll let him share a bit of his story. Here you go, Chris. You're still muted, buddy.
Winning today.
There you go.
I started off last time, so I didn't have to do that. So, anywho, Chris Swisher from small town in southern Indiana. My athletic journey or career kind of started out. I qualified for state the first time my senior year and won the mile. Kind of was an underdog, but because I excelled so late in my high school career and to win state, I didn't really have a lot of options or a lot of scholarship options. So I picked the school that was, I thought, best for me. It was a Division II school. Ended up, it wasn't a really good fit. So after my freshman year, I transferred to Miami of Ohio, which is up to Division I. A lot more tougher competition, I think, for the most part. My senior year there, I was able to become a All-American in cross country. So really worked my tail off real hard to achieve the successes that I had. Definitely hit some bumps in the roads with transferring from one school to another. Post-collegiately, I competed for a couple of years while teaching and coaching. But the biggest thing that I've been able to provide and help is, during coaching athletes is helping them go and get those recruiting letters and walking beside them, like Amy said, to say, hey, look, these are the schools that are interested in me, but what school really is the best for me? Where do I really fit in? It's not whether or not this really fancy school wants me or whether or not this school is going to give me the most financial aid or scholarship. It's really where do I really fit in? And so that's what I think we really want to help provide, is that community, that mentorship, where we walk beside them, where we're not actually their coach, because their coach and their parents are people that are going to add stress to their lives. So that's a little bit about me. Before we jump into Austin, I'm going to kind of run through his little bio. We are going to record this webinar because we are going to eventually turn it into a podcast. So if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat, or if you want to save them for the end, we'll open it up and Austin will be probably more than happy to answer those. So Austin Halcomb is a mental performance coach located in Indianapolis, Indiana. He received his master's degree in mental health, counseling, and sports psychology from Indiana University in Bloomington. He owns a company called Prime Performance that helps athletes become the best version of themselves. I lost my spot. By focusing on the 3 pillars to elite performance: biomechanics, mental health, and mental performance training. Austin specializes in helping individuals overcome performance anxiety and burnout. His clientele reach expands all over the country and at different levels of sport. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Austin, who's going to talk about owning your zone.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. So I've kind of compiled my keynote here and tried to condense it a little bit. I just did this in Vegas 2 weeks ago at a really elite AAU basketball tournament called the Exclusive. But I'll start with kind of my background and show where I kind of fit in and what kind of brought me to my current company, what brought me to you all here today and this webinar. So this all really started for me subconsciously my senior year of high school. And I just remember very vividly, like one day I just woke up and I just could tell and I knew that something wasn't right. And I said it out loud. I was like, man, just something just doesn't feel right with me anymore. And I was performing at a really high level throughout the beginning of my senior year. This was about a month into my senior year basketball season that I started to feel this. And I was getting recruited a little bit. And when I felt that and I knew that something was off, I just kind of made the decision that I wanted to forego being a collegiate athlete, which had been a dream of mine for as long as I could remember. And basketball is my sport, so that was what I really wanted to go do. I ended up foregoing that, and I called all the coaches that night and that were recruiting me, and I just said, "Hey, thanks, but no thanks." And there was kind of the start of getting back to normal. It was like a weight lifted off of my shoulders, and I started to feel a little bit better. But what I was experiencing was something that I can't even really begin to describe. And it's something I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. Like, I was going through some major anxiety, some depression. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't sleeping well. I was tired all the time. My body ached consistently at all times. And it was just a consistent mental fog. And I just really had no clue how to attack it. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if I was sick. There was just all kinds of things that were flowing through my head. And I didn't know. And I didn't know for years, actually. But that decision led me to IU in Bloomington, where I started out studying kinesiology, which is the study of human movement. And I wanted to be a physical therapist because I wanted to stick close to athletics. And I was one of those that was always seeing a physical therapist and working on injuries in my body, I felt like, throughout my career. So I ended up doing that. And along the way, I got to work with the IU women's basketball team as a practice player, and got to work with the IU men's basketball team as a practice player for a little bit. And it was a great experience. Being an athlete, I think you all might know who played that you have the advantage, or at least at IU, you have the advantage to create your class schedule before everybody else. So being at practices that I needed to be there for, I got to create my schedule before other students. And while I was doing that my junior year, I found this extracurricular course that, seemed like that easy A that I wanted to go get, and something that I was interested in, and that was sports psychology with Dr. John Ragland. So I signed up for that class immediately, got into it, and one of the very first lectures that we ever went over was this topic of burnout. And burnout is defined as the extreme mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion of the human mind and body. And right then and there, I was like, oh my gosh, like 4 or 5 years ago, that is exactly what I experienced. Like, that was exactly what had happened to me my senior year. And I was locked in more than I had ever been locked into a lecture in my entire life. I listened to every single word that Dr. Ragland had said. I took every single note that I possibly could, and I kept the PowerPoint. It's still on my computer today, and I kind of review that, and I'm like, that was the changing point in my life, and a huge changing point that led me to the career that I'm in. And that week, I ended up meeting with my academic counselor, and I was like, hey, I don't know what this field is about. I do not know what the job outlook is like. I don't even know what they get paid, but I have to be in this, and I need to get into this career field. So we made the switch. She ended up telling me that I was in luck, and that IU was one of the few schools in the country that offered a master's level program for sports psychology. So I got to live out everybody's dream and be kind of a super senior. I got to stay in Bloomington for 2 more years. I got to go to college for 6 years. So I did my master's in Bloomington as well. I did my master's in mental health counseling and sports psychology. And I got to do some really cool internships at high schools. I got to do some therapy with adult clients along the way. And I really got to see what it was like to work with athletes who were experiencing some of the same things that I was, or things that I've seen from my friends and teammates, or things that I had never experienced or seen anybody else experience that were much more extreme than I ever went through. And I got to work with those athletes and help them. And it was awesome. It was really rewarding. And along the way, I got to meet some really great people. I got connected to Stu Singer. He's the Washington Wizards and Washington Mystics sports psychologist. And Stu kind of took me under his wing. I remember the very first time I called him through my connection, he gave me 2 hours of his time out of his busy day. And, he told me all about the field. And I also have gotten to meet who I work pretty well with is Graham Betchart. He owns Train the Mind. He's a mental performance coach. He kind of does it a little bit differently than I do, but he's in the NBA. He's got guys like Ben Simmons he's worked with, Karl Anthony Towns. He's worked with the Suns quite a bit. So Graham has been really influential in getting me to start my company, Prime Performance. And seeing what they did and what I had done at all my internship sites, I kind of just went out on a whim and created this. And so here I am now, working with individuals, working with teams. I've signed on a contract with the Indiana Canes baseball organization here in Indy. Have all kinds of different individual athletes that I meet with. I work with coaches. I also work with businesses. And with that, I think that there are three main pillars, which is kind of what we're here for today to discuss, that make up elite athletes and that help athletes get to an elite level. And these are in no specific order. I'm going to talk about the last two a little bit more than the first, but the first one I think is biomechanics. So I started out with that kinesiology background. I took a lot of biomechanics classes. There was a lot of math. I'm a math guy, so I really got into it. And biomechanics is things like you're looking at launch angle of the arm, you're looking at your feet positioning, sometimes you're looking at the torque of your hips. It's different in every sport, and it's different for what you're trying to attack with that athlete from the physical side. And then the second pillar that kind of is a really big topic today is mental health. And so my master's was in mental health counseling. I'm license eligible in mental health counseling. That was not a route that I wanted to pursue, but it's one that I'm knowledgeable in, and it's one that I think is extremely important in what I do with athletes. And I feel very fortunate to be trained in being able to assess and being able to know when something is going on that's a little bit more severe than we would like to think with an athlete. And, I've got all kinds of connections and referrals. So mental health is a big piece. And more recently, we've seen that with Simone Biles in the Olympics. Mental health was a big thing, which I'll get into in a little bit. But that's the second pillar. And then my third pillar, which is kind of my bread and butter, the one thing that I work on the most and what most of my content comes from, is mental performance. And people are like, well, mental health, mental performance, it's kind of the same. And yeah, if you combine the two and you get the best out of both of them, that's what sports psychology is. And one of the first questions I ask teams and organizations I work with, I'm like, how many of you have heard of sports psychology or know what it is? And there's been many times I've been in there and not a single person raises their hand, whether they're scared or whether they just actually don't know. Like, it's not a well-known thing, and it's a relatively new field, but it's a growing field. And I would argue within the last 3 months, it's never been more popular than it has been today. And people are really starting to see the benefit of it. So what I do, I usually when I work with teams and I do this keynote here, I give them some background on what it's like on an individual session or what it's like on a group session. So my dad's a masonry worker. He's all about bricking houses, and currently he's building his own house. He's finishing it up right now. But what he does and what I've learned growing up is that he always has his toolbox with him. And, when he's going in to work on his job or whatever, he just picks out whatever tool he needs out of that toolbox for the time being. So what I've kind of constructed through my company, and what the main thing that I work on with athletes is building their mental skills toolbox. And there are all kinds of mental skills and mental techniques that we as athletes, we as individuals, we as business people can use to help boost performance or to help get over mental blocks. So one of the first things that I ever work on with athletes in that regard is something that I tell athletes, you do this every minute of every day. And this is the first skill I always teach them. And I'm like, it's the very first thing that you ever did when you came into this world. And that's breathing, specifically deep breathing, because I feel everybody who is listening to this, whether it's right now or in the future, I can almost guarantee you've had somebody or you have heard somebody say, just breathe. Like in a stressful situation, you've had somebody tell you, or you've heard somebody say, just breathe, just take a breath. And that's great. And that's something that people say quite often, but I'm curious how many of you have ever heard or had anybody tell you how to breathe, like how to effectively use your breathing to your advantage. So when I work with athletes, I have them take one arm and reach across and grab their opposite shoulder and let their arm hang in a V formation right on their chest. I have them take their other arm and I have them put it right across their belly, right on their belly button, right on their gut. And then I say, I'm going to take my hands down. I want you, based on these instructions, to take the deepest possible breath that you can take. And I'll have the athletes do that, and they blow it up like a fish, and they try to, get as big as they can with as much air as they can get inside them. And I ask them, I say, what arm did you feel move the most? Did you feel the top? Did you feel the bottom one? Was it a little bit of both? Majority of the time, I have seen athletes say the top one or a little bit of both. And that's understandable because that's more where your lungs are at. And when your lungs are filling up, of course, you're going to feel that top one. But I tell them when we're looking at deep breathing, that's shallow breathing up in the chest. When we're looking at deep breathing, you want to get that down into your gut. And there's a reason for that. When it's down in your gut, you're lowering heart rate, you're lowering your blood pressure, you're getting yourself into a more calm, relaxed feeling, you're getting yourself into a present moment. And that is where you get the benefit from deep breathing. So when I have athletes do that, I'm like, you have to think of deep breathing as not just getting yourself calm, but it's also something that gets you into the present moment. It is something that you know. Having something known in the unknown is extremely beneficial. And for athletes, I tell them, you know, you're inhaling, you know, you're exhaling. That's something that's known. In a pressure situation, you do not know what's going to happen. At the end of a game, you don't know how it's going to turn out. As much as you would like to think and guess, you do not know in that present moment. You might be right on your guess, but you have no clue. At the beginning of your game, especially, you have no clue how it's going to go. And that's why we play sports, and that's why people bet on sports, and that's why people like watching sports, because you just don't know. And from that, I have them continually work on focusing on their breath. And that helps them not only relax, like I said, but get into that present moment focus. The second skill that I work on with athletes is mental imagery and mental visualization. And you see this all over the MLB landscape. Like, the MLB owns the skill, I feel like. I see every single MLB player that does mental training or is very outspoken on sports psychology says that this is what gets them where they need to be. And mental imagery and visualization are kind of the same, but they're also slightly different. So mental imagery, when I think of that, it's literally imagining yourself in successful situations. So when I have athletes come in, I say, all right, close your eyes and use your eyelids as a projector screen. And I want you to mentally imagine and project onto the back of your eyelids what you want to happen, what successful situation you want to happen. And I literally have them run through, I'm like, run through your pregame, run through the first quarter, run through the second quarter, imagine what it's like at halftime, what's the third quarter look like, what's the fourth quarter, what are you doing post game? And I have them run through it. And sometimes it takes 20 to 30 minutes for them to literally and mentally imagine what they want to do. I'm like, I want you to be the star of your own show. And I have them do that imagery. So that's mental imagery. And then on the flip side of it, visualization, kind of the same, but slightly different. This is literally visualizing these successful events. And I call it like highlight reel watching. So for example, I had a diving coach come up to me one time and he said, hey, we're at a week out from a really important competition. And one of my main divers, he's unable to perform even the simplest of dives. Like, we have no clue what's going on. Can you help him? I said, send him into my office. I can't make promises because this isn't always a short-term fix. Sometimes it's a long-term, but I said, I'll work with him and see what I can do. I had rapport with this athlete, so it was easy to pick up and start the session off with working on skills. And we went through some stuff. And at the very end, I said, if you're not going to do anything, I want you to do this. And I said, I want you to go home. I want you to get on YouTube, or I want you to get one of your highlight reels, one of your highlight videos that you have of you doing dives, or look up somebody that's doing these dives that you want to do. And I said, I want you to literally just sit there and watch. Do not take notes. Don't be texting. Don't be calling. Don't be focusing on anything outside of that video. Just watch for 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. Just watch. And I want you to get a good 8 hours of sleep. I said, that's all I want you to do. Ended up coming back to practice 2 days later, and it was fine. It was just one of those little mental blocks that, sometimes we as athletes, we just don't know why we can't function properly, but it just happens. And a quick fix like that, it's really beneficial to athletic performance. And then finally, the third thing that I work on with athletes is the skill of self-talk. And there is much more than just these three. These are just the three first main ones that I work on with athletes. But self-talk is this concept of feeding the good wolf. And there's a little story behind it, but essentially it's asking athletes, do you feed the good wolf or do you feed the bad wolf? And it's talking to athletes about, are you talking good to yourself? Are you positive when you talk to yourself, or are you negative when you talk to yourself? How do you go about that? And when I work with athletes, one of the first things I do is I work with them on I am statements. And this is like make or break in self-talk whenever I work with them. So for me, I say, these I am statements, I want you to create 3 statements, 3 positive things that you can say about yourself, or 3 things that you find that you bring benefit to other people around you. And it is the most shocking thing to me at the high school level that athletes cannot come up with 3 things to say nicely about themselves. And that's like one of the main things. I'm like, if you can't even think of 3 positive things to say about yourself, then you are in a bad state of mind right now. And so we work on them with bringing up their self-talk, finding out things that they can continually say to themselves to reaffirm who they are as a person and as an athlete, to make them think more positively. On top of that, we do things like cue words or cue phrases. So I'll ask them what they think of when I say the word calm. And, sometimes they can be instructional phrases like power. Like if I'm working with a runner, I will have them say power or speed continually. Other times they can be like a reset, which I really love. You can have a cue phrase. And one of the main ones I work on with athletes is this phrase of stop, breathe, reset, next play. So that means stop your thought, stop the negative thinking, take a breath, reset your thoughts, move on to the next play. That's essentially what self-talk is, cue words, cue phrases. So that is very briefly what building a mental skills toolbox is. But one of the main concepts that I get with, like I try to tie in concepts and models because there's just so many and I'm still learning as I go on each and every day. But one of the main concepts that I work on with athletes is the concept and the model of the think, feel, behave model. And essentially what that says, I'll wrap it up with this model, but your thoughts directly affect your feelings or your emotions, and your feelings directly affect your behavior or your performance. So what you think is how you feel, and how you feel is how you behave or perform. And when I work with athletes, I kind of give them the biology side to it. You know, when you're thinking negative, you release this chemical called cortisol. It's a stress-inducing hormone or stress-inducing chemical. And, you know, you start to think negative, well, cortisol is released. You start to feel that in your body physically. So you feel emotionally negative, and then that translates into your physical performance and you behave or perform negatively. On the flip side, if you are thinking positive, you start to release serotonin, and that's considered the happy chemical in the body. So as you're releasing serotonin, you start to feel happier and you're emotionally happier. And guess what? You start to behave and perform in a more happier setting or a more successful setting. So think, feel, behave model is really, really beneficial to athletes. And I tie it in with this, and I'll wrap it up with this. But I think when we're thinking about high school athletes, especially their thoughts, it's really how they're evaluating themselves. That is where you start to see the root of all problems or the root of all the success that they're gaining. And I'm older now, so I can see it from a step back. Like as an athlete, I didn't see it from this perspective, but now that I'm older, I don't have kids or anything, but I see it in the athletes that I work with that are at the high school level. I get it now. People ask the wrong questions, and athletes ask themselves the wrong questions day after day after day. The main thing everybody's always asking is, were you the leading point scorer? Or did you win or lose? Or did you set this milestone in your career if maybe you were going to reach 1,000 points in basketball? Or did you get this many hits in softball? Or this, and this. Things that we can't, as athletes, as much as we want to be the leading scorer, as much as we want to win, we cannot control those things. There is no control over that. Even if you are the guy that's averaging the most points in the state in basketball, you cannot control if you're going to be the leading scorer in that game. The defense might completely shut you out. So asking those questions before and after games just really sets the athlete up for a more negative stance on the game and how they view the game. What I encourage athletes and coaches and parents to ask their athletes is, well, did you show good energy? Did you have hustle? You know, were you a good teammate? That's a really good one. Did you leave it out all on the floor? Or I challenge them to ask an even bigger question. And it's really hard in today's society to ask these type of questions, but I challenge them. I'm like, when I work with the athletes, I say, the bigger question here is, are you making a positive impact on other people's lives? And they look at me and they're like, well, what does that matter with my personal performance? I'm like, well, are you making a positive impact on other people's lives? Because if you are making a positive impact, if you're thankful to your custodians or your managers for doing your laundry, or if you're thankful to the bus driver for getting you to and from the game, if you're appreciative of your family members for coming and supporting you and taking time out of their day to not only spend with you, but I'm sure financially they put into your career too. If you're thankful for them, if you practice gratitude for the people around you and the things that are going on around you and your athletic ability, well, guess what? You are then behaving positively, which then in turn affects your thinking more positively, which affects your feelings, and you emotionally are more positive, which then in turn affects your behavior again in sport, and you start to perform in sport more positively. So those are kind of the concepts and the skills that I work on with athletes. It was very short in summation of what it is. Usually when I work with athletes, that's like a 10-part series. I do this stuff usually takes like 10 sessions for me to get out all the educational pieces to my athletes, but that's the short elevator pitch onto what I do and what sports psychology is and some of the benefits that the athletes can get out of it.
Wow, that's awesome. I was taking notes furiously here, Austin, and I'm like, I didn't catch
Same.
everything. I'm glad it's recorded. No, seriously, this is some fabulous stuff. And as you were talking, I'm like, gosh, I wish I had this when I was a young athlete. Just some great practical ways to manage the thought. I mean, we don't realize how much, what's between our ears impacts everything else. And it's interesting that you were talking, because Brittany was even saying some things last week, like her main kind of thread in her talk was, the whole like, thinking, feeling, get that, like what I think about is basically who I become, right? So, and we have to be very mindful of that. So there was even some common thread there, but thank you so much. I want to hear your whole thing at some point, because you've given us a taste, and I'd love to hear some more. So let me just start with one question. I mean, I think probably some of these questions will definitely draw more of this out, but what are the key qualities to being mentally tough or mentally fit?
Yeah, so luckily I've had a lot of practice in being able to evaluate and assess athletes, and throughout my career I've kind of had a common theme, or a few 5 different characteristics that I see with athletes. And this is in the bigger version of my keynote. I go over this more in depth, or something along the lines of it. But one of the first things that I tell athletes, and these are in no specific order either, but when you think of elite athlete or a mentally tough athlete, you think of somebody who's confident. And confidence is the belief in yourself and the belief in your own personal skills. And when I work with a confident athlete, they are the type of people that they walk into a room, or they walk into the gym, or they walk onto the field, and they are not comparing themselves to anybody else. They know what they bring to the table. They know what they have, and they know what their ability is. So that's really what confidence is. The second thing I see that's a common theme is consistency. So doing the same thing over and over and over again in routine. And when I work with athletes, you can really tell the ones that are consistent and that routinely do things over and over and over again, and you can tell the ones that aren't. And I think consistency is a huge thing. Something else, the third thing is that they're focused. They have a lot of focus, and focus is not easy to come by. Basically, focus is getting you into the present moment. So I work with athletes on that deep breathing, and focus is being able to get rid of all distractions externally and get rid of those distractions internally. So the focused athlete is a big one. And the fourth one of 5 here that I see in all my elite athletes, and this is a little bit different than what a lot of other people would say, but I think and I believe that my elite athletes are instinctive. They're automatic. So when I work with these athletes, they can do things more easily and more automatically than the non-elite or the athletes that struggle can. And it's amazing to me that a majority of athletes are not instinctive and not automatic, because you do all this training in the preseason, you do all this training in the off season, you do all this training during the season. Why, when you get into a game environment, do you not trust that training? Because when you lack being automatic and when you lack being instinctive, it's you saying, I do not trust my training. And it's you saying, I don't trust where I am at physically and mentally to perform at this level. So those people that are instinctive, they're just automatic. They put their brain on autopilot and they let their body just do the work. And they reap the benefits from it. So the fifth thing that I see with athletes is they are able to handle pressure. And something that I have not been able to figure out is if they are just born with the ability to handle pressure differently, if it's the cultural environment that they grew up in, or that they've been around to handle pressure differently, they're more accustomed to it, or if it's that they view pressure differently. So those are all 3 really different ways to think about it. And I've never figured out which one it is. It might be different for all athletes, but athletes who can handle pressure, the main thing that I'm thinking of is that they can handle it from a perspective that is different in the way that we think about it. So most people think of pressure as negative. They think of pressure as this thing that's there to haunt you and to keep you up at night and to make your performance worse. For me, I think pressure is your body literally alerting you that something important is about to happen. And it's your body saying, hey, I don't know what's going on, but your mind is thinking that this thing is kind of important, and it raises the level of importance to you. So you start to feel differently. And then all of a sudden your behavior follows that. But if we think of pressure as a good thing, as our body and mind alerting us, we could use that to our advantage. We could use it to energize us. And people say, oh, I get butterflies all the time. I get sick before games. Well, I tell people, when you get that butterfly feeling, why don't you use those butterflies to fly in formation? Like, why don't you use them for your advantage? Use those butterflies to energize you and get you pumped up and ready to go. So those are the main things I see in my elite athletes that are mentally fit.
I like that. Butterflies fly in formation. I love it. And just that whole frame, right? That whole mindset, how we viewing pressure, because that can really set the tone for sure. I've heard the phrase "pressure is a privilege," but like you said, I think it's interesting how different athletes handle it. So some really great tips there. Next question for you, Austin, is what are some tips on overcoming adversity in sport and or life? Because we know, right? I mean, even when, life continues to happen regardless. So we have adversity in both planes. So what are some great tips to overcoming those?
I think it's mainly how you view adversity and what you think of adversity. So when we think of adversity, it's something that's hard or a little bit difficult or something that, gets us out of our comfort zone. And I challenge athletes all the time when they come in, and they might not directly say the word adversity, but I know that they're stating that they don't want to go through this adversity, or they're nervous about doing this thing that might seem like it's difficult. But when I work with them, I'm like, well, you can look at adversity in one way. And it's this concept I say, choose your heart. So when we talk about adversity, I'm like, well, if they say that exercising and training is an adversity they don't want to mess with because it's hard, I'm like, yeah, well, you can train and you can exercise. I don't like being on the treadmill, but I do it. That's the hard that I choose. In the short term, it sucks. And lifting weights isn't always easy. Exercising isn't always easy. But neither is being obese and having a ton of health problems. That's hard too. So, short term exercising, not the greatest, not the most fun, but long term it has benefits. And it's the other way whenever you look at it, being unhealthy and not exercising. Same thing goes. I really struggled with getting out of bed in the mornings in college. I just could not get up and I could not get motivated. But I know that something that has set me up for success now is my morning routine, and that sets the precedent for my whole day. I very rarely work out at 5 in the morning or 4:30 in the morning. Like it's very rare, maybe once every 2 months or so. But those are the days that I get the most things done. And it's not even close. So getting up early, waking up early, getting your morning routine done. Yeah, that's hard. I don't like to wake up early and get my stuff done before work, but it's also hard to sleep in and to miss out on my goals and to miss out on my dreams. So when I work with athletes on adversity, it's choosing your hard. Everything's hard in life. It's just how you view it. And it's just how what hard that you want to, go through.
Right. That's a good word. And it's a choice, right? It's a choice that we are making. And I think that's another important piece. It's that we need to realize. Choose your hard. I like that. All right. Next question for you. So how do you know you're experiencing burnout, and how do you cope with that? Yeah.
I didn't know what it was at the time, like I said, and it hits everybody differently from all the research. This is probably the one topic I've researched the most and I've put the most time into in my career. And it affects everybody differently. Some are on the lower end of burnout, where it's just kind of a lower level amount. Maybe it's a little bit of extra stress. Maybe they're a little bit more tired. Maybe they don't feel completely all there mentally and physically. Others like myself, I'd like to think I was more on the high end of burnout, where you get that depression, anxiety consistently. You just feel like you got hit by a semi truck every single day. There's a mental fog consistently. You'll really be able to notice it when you lose passion for whatever it is that you were doing. And burnout this is not just a sport thing. This is an educational thing. I'm sure almost all high school athletes I've worked with say they're burnt out on school. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but it's an educational thing. It's a work thing. It's a social thing. You can get burnt out in relationships, but you'll know when that love for whatever it is that you were doing starts to dissipate. And you'll know whenever you just consistently feel this way. Sometimes it's a mental health thing that you really need to go see somebody for. And that's the benefit of working with somebody like myself or having somebody in your organization, is you can assess for those things. But other times, if you want to self-evaluate and you want to self-assess and you want to self-medicate, the one true thing that will help, and this is one of the hardest things that I ask athletes to do, is to completely take yourself away from whatever that event is that's causing your burnout. So if you're an athlete, I tell them, I'm like, it might not be possible for you based on your circumstances, but the one thing that is going to help with this and to cure this for you the quickest is to take 2 complete weeks off. I don't want you doing anything with it. I don't want you watching any movies or shows that involve this sport. I don't want you even thinking about it. Like, just completely separate yourself from the sport or from the work or from whatever it is that you're getting burnt out on. That's the main thing that could really help. I understand that that's at the high school level. It is so tough for a high schooler to go up to their high school coach when playing time is on the line, and when you're letting your teammates down is something that you have to deal with. It's tough for you to say, hey, I need a 2-week vacation from this. I'm not there. But that is something that you have to look at. Simone Biles, who is probably one of the greatest athletes in the world and playing at the peak of what some people in her position would think would be the height of their career in the Olympics a couple weeks ago, did just that. And she knew she was not there. She almost suffered a pretty serious injury. She knew it was just from the mental burnout and the mental exhaustion that she had been going through from all of her training, and this ability to have to perform to what standards she had set for herself and what other people had set for her. So it's really taking yourself away from that. If you can't do that, I always tell people, in the meantime, do meditation. When I first started in sports psychology, I was like, I will never use that in my practice. I see no benefit into it. Like, I was just fresh kind of into the field, and I was like, meditation is not for me. That's not something I would ever be into. Well, 2 or 3 years from when I said that, I have a lifetime subscription to the Calm app. I do meditation pretty frequently, and if I was burnt out, that is something I would do daily, multiple times a day, is meditation. And you can find all kinds of stuff all over YouTube if you don't want to pay for it like I did on the Calm app. But the Calm app is really great. And one other thing that you can do is, if you can't take that full 2 weeks off, I tell people, take a burnout vacation. And that is where you just go and completely treat yourself one day or one weekend, and you completely get away from that event that's causing the burnout. You do all the things that you want to do. You eat all the foods that you want to eat. You just completely treat yourself and kind of have a short mini vacation away from that. And I think that you will come back feeling at least slightly refreshed, more than you are currently.
Yeah, it was interesting because my sister was mentioning this during the Olympics, that I don't know which athlete it was, but she heard like she needed just to get away. She went for a hike, probably inside the village, because they couldn't really go too many places, because of COVID. But it did world of wonder for her just to step away from, may have been the pool or something. She just stepped away from the pool for the day and came back. And like you said, sometimes just getting out of the environment can be huge in clearing your palate, I guess, so to speak, to help, like when in those situations where you can't just take off. So, but yes, those are some great suggestions. So, all right, Laura.
Austin, I want to kind of expand on that a little bit. You had mentioned it's difficult for high school athletes to, walk up to their coach and say these things. What about student athletes that are being heavily recruited and there's a scholarship on the line? What would you tell kids in those situations about the importance of taking that time to meditate or take the break with burnout? Why is that so important, even especially for students that are looking to pursue, athletics in college?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's even more on the line for those athletes specifically. And what I would tell them is, you can look at it kind of where you're at now. Yeah, you still might be able to perform and you still might have a little bit left in the tank to finish out this senior year. And you're like, oh, I'll be fine once the summer hits and I can rest before I head off to college. Depending on where they're at, junior or senior year, usually it's when most people are recruited. But I would say to the seniors, if you are a college recruit, there is really very minimal time to rest. So do not think that you are going to get that vacation, that month-long vacation, because there's minimal time. College coaches get you in there as quickly as can be, and you're one of the first freshmen on campus, and you are training right away. I would highly encourage them to get into the meditation state if they feel that taking time off is something that they can't do. I think that the meditation piece is huge. What I would then talk to them about is, well, you can look at it here, and I would self-disclose and use my personal story with this. Is you can look at it where you're at here, and you're playing at this level, and this is going really well for you. You're getting recruited, and then what's it going to look like? I would ask them, like, what does it look like 2 or 3 years down the line when you're still experiencing this stuff and you're on college and there's money on the line, and if you end up having to quit due to that, what happens there? You're 3 years into college or 2 years into college, and then you got to go and pay for it on your own because you just can't handle it. I would tell them that if they have a school that is looking at them and they don't understand that athlete needs to take time off, or that athlete has some things going on mentally, then that school is not the right choice for them from the get-go. And there are plenty of colleges in the nation that you could go to that will benefit you greatly. I can't tell you how many times I saw it at IU where athletes were experiencing a situation or environment that they just completely did not expect, and they ended up transferring out anyways. I've heard so many stories on it. So the school that you think is so perfect, and the school that you think is going to get you to the pros, or that's going to get you to everything that you want and all your hopes and dreams, it might not be that perfect of a school for you, maybe for somebody else. But I tell athletes all the time when they're looking at colleges, I say, do not set your heart and soul into one school. Like, you really have to do some thinking, and you really need to see what that school offers you. So
it's almost like you knew exactly what happened in my story. that sounds very, very familiar.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that perspective so much. I think that you've touched on so many things of the importance of, once again, finding the right school and understanding that if it doesn't work out, at one school, there is a life outside of that. And yeah, I think that that's amazing. Thank you. That was super helpful. Another question that we have for you is, what have you learned throughout your career that you wish you knew back when you were a full-time student athlete?
Yeah, that's
a loaded question, right?
that's a great question. And that's one of Brian Kane's. He's a really great mental performance coach. He's probably like the top dog at our field. And that's like the question he asks everybody. And in short, what I wish I knew back then was nothing, because it would not have led me to where I currently am. I'm glad I didn't know this stuff back then, because I feel very blessed to be here. But to answer your question, when I work with athletes, I'm like, man, I really wish that I had this knowledge of this back then. The main thing that I would tell myself is that you can get rid of the pressure that's on you. Because when we're elite athletes, I don't care how good you are, you feel pressure in some way, shape, or form. It might not be at the end of games where you choke. You might be an ice cold killer in a basketball game. You might have that Kobe mentality. Like, you might dominate that area, but you feel pressure somewhere and in some shape and in some form throughout your career, or even in your life. It might not even be sport pressure, but you feel it. And that is where I think burnout really begins, is when we feel that negative pressure and we start to get that anxiety, and we feel that pressure to perform, or we feel that pressure to meet somebody's standards. Maybe you're playing for a mom or dad and you're trying to get that scholarship because they can't afford to get you to college. There's pressure in all of that. And I would tell my high school senior self, like, this pressure you are feeling, you can completely get rid of it. Like, you don't have to be, you don't have to think of pressure as something that's negative or something that you have to do. Like, you can completely take yourself out of that situation. And I was the absolute worst at thinking negative thoughts at all times. Like, I always thought the worst in every situation. And no matter the outcome, no matter if I was a leading scorer or if our team completely dominated or whatever it was, like, I always thought that there was something that could be better. And I really wish that I could go back in time and tell myself that those negative thoughts that you're experiencing and how you're trying to view your current situation in the world is not how you should be viewing it. And there's this book that I read that completely changed my life. And I wish I would have read it in high school. And it is something that I give to everybody as a resource. So, like, what's the one book that you would recommend aside from a few sports psychology books? This one's not so much sports psychology, but it is Zen and the Art of Happiness by Chris Prentice. And I won't ruin it for anybody, but in short, what this book really is all about is changing your perspective on your life and the universe. And, you know, you can think of the universe as like the actual universe and the solar system and all that, or, you know, if you're religious like myself, you could think of it as God. And the main lesson that I got out of that book, and it hit home really hard to me, was everything that's going on in your life, every event is the universe setting you up for success. Like, the universe or God does not want to see you fail. Like, whatever it is that you believe in, or whatever viewpoint you want to go from, like, it is wanting you to succeed. Like, it is wanting you to have success. So that negative thought that you're having, or that situation that you think didn't go exactly how you wanted it to, or maybe your performance completely sucked, something bigger is in line for you. And what I didn't know back then was that something bigger was prime performance. Something bigger was 6 years at my awesome college of IU. 6 years that I didn't get to see the team in the NCAA tournament too many times. But anyways, you know,
You were there at the wrong time. That's all.
I was there at the wrong
time.
I got 1 year of IU basketball in the NCAA tournament as a student, but that's okay. They're on the up and up, and I'm happy for them. But I really wish that I would have had that perspective on life, because I cannot stress enough how much that has changed me as a person, as an individual, as a son, you know, as a friend. It's changed me as a clinician. It's changed my entire life perspective. So if there's ever a book I ever want anybody to read, it's Zen and the Art of Happiness by Chris Prentice. And it might not be for everybody, but that's what I wish I knew back then, is that everything works out, everything happens for a reason. And, you know, it's all going to work out in the end. And I also wish I knew all these mental skills too, because they are so beneficial and they're so great, and you can use them. What I tell athletes and parents when they're skeptical about working with me, I'm like, if you don't even use this for your sports life, you can take this for the rest of your life in every aspect. Like relationships, you can use this stuff. Business, you can use this stuff. Businesses pay a lot of money for people like myself to come in and work with their business on these skills. You can use it everywhere. So I really wish I would have had that perspective back then. And I really wish I would have known the mental skills that I teach.
That's huge. That's absolutely huge. The universe wants you to succeed. That is a life statement. That is absolutely a life statement. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm looking forward to checking out this book. I think the only other thing that I would like to ask you is, do you have resources? Obviously, you shared that book, but do you have resources to share that you would recommend for high school athletes, parents of athletes, you know, that you think would help with guidance of mental performance and mental health, your 3 pillars? What resources would you recommend?
Yeah, I think Brian Kane is probably the leader in all this stuff. He's probably the main mental performance coach you'll find online and on social media, and his content is awesome. Like, Kane is just different. He's built different. I will say that. Like, that guy is up early and he is doing the work from the time he gets up till the time he goes to bed. He's got an awesome podcast. He just came out with a second one. So if you just type in Brian Kane on wherever you listen to podcasts at, you can find him. He's got one to where he interviews different coaches, and he's got one that's a baseball one, he's got a golf one, that are all on the same podcast. And then his second podcast is a mental performance daily podcast, and it's 3 minutes every day. He puts a new podcast up, kind of like a life lesson. He got that from Dr. Rob Gilbert, which is also another resource I would like to recommend. If you get online and you type in Success Hotline with Dr. Rob Gilbert, you'll see that number and it'll be on there. And I call that every single morning when I go to work. And it's 3 minutes of this old guy. He's got a really great accent, and he does mental performance stuff. He's done over 11,000 messages. He's been doing this for 11,000 straight days. So if you think he's not going to be there one morning, I've yet to not hear him record a new message. He does at 7:30 a.m. Eastern time every morning, something new. So Success Hotline has been really big for me. Let's see here. Zen and the Art of Happiness is a book. And then The Champion's Mind by Dr. Jim Aftermow. That is a great book. That's like my sports psych Bible. It has so many different skills and concepts that you can learn about. And it's kind of put into his perspective from somebody who isn't in the field. Like if I had not pursued sports psychology, I would know what this guy's talking about and I could learn something from it. So that's something I recommend. And then finally, for what I do, I'm kind of building up Prime Performance on social media. And I'm going to be coming out with I'm going to have a coaches series. I'm going to have an athlete series, and it's going to be online coursework. It's just going to be like an online class, and there's going to be videos, articles, instruction, anything and everything that you could think about that I think would be beneficial to athletes and coaches alike. So you can follow my stuff on Instagram and Twitter. It's at Halcomb Prime, so AUSTHALC Prime, and I'll be posting all that stuff as it comes along. It's in the process, so it's coming. I'm waiting for the perfect time to get it going. I want to perfect it. I'm that kind of a guy. So,
Hey, Austin, can you repeat the Instagram? I'm trying to type some of this stuff in the chat so they have. So you said it's AUST what?
HALC. So the first 4 letters of my first and last name.
I froze there for a second. I'm sorry. So it's AUST.
I can type it in there too.
Oh yeah.
Yep. AUSTHALC Prime. And that's for Instagram and Twitter. I'm more on the Instagram side of things because I like the visuals. I post a lot of Brian Kane stuff and some of the other mental performance coaches that I follow. And I've been really trying to build it up for athletes to, just when they're scrolling through social media, they might find a quote or they might find a link to something that, could just completely change their life. Success Hotline is huge. Brian Kane's Mental Performance Daily is huge. Like there's always something that I get out of their 3-minute spiel per day. So
absolutely. Fabulous. Thank you so much. This is some gold right here. We do want to open it up for questions too live here. Like anyone want to ask Austin a question or two, please feel free. He's here for you, and you may have thought of something that we did not, which is likely. Anybody? Okay, well, if you can't think of one in the moment, I know sometimes being put on the spot, it can be hard to think of one, but one of the cool things is that Austin is going to be in our free community of Next Level Athlete Advantage. So he'll be providing some resources there, or like resources that he has discovered. So you can feel free to ask him some questions there, because he'll be popping in now and then and would be happy to connect with you and answer your questions that come up. So Austin, we want to thank you so much for being here tonight. Wow, I think, this is one of the reasons why like we talked about earlier, why we started Next Level Athlete Advantage, is to provide stories like yours, the tools and resources that you're providing. For Chris, Laura, and I, right? Each of our athletic journeys is unique in our stories, but we all had a struggle. We struggled with something, whether it was transition or overwhelm or stress and anxiety or relationship challenges. That's just part of life, right? It's not unique to student athletes, but yeah, so to be able to come together like this and talk about it in community, and to kind of see ourselves in someone else's story. I think one of the things that's beautiful about that is just an awareness it brings to ourselves. I mean, even now, right? There's some things that you shared. I'm like, wow, I didn't think about that, when I was an athlete. But that's something that I can take in now though, right? And utilize even now. So I think, one of the things that I do as a leadership trainer, right, is talk about awareness. And if we're not aware, then we can't grow and change and get better. So you've brought about just in the brief moments we've had with you, you've brought about some great awareness for us to take away and to help us get better and to grow and to hopefully put some of these things to practice, especially for current student athletes, whether at the high school or collegiate level. So we're so grateful for that. So, and we want to thank you guys for tuning in live, and especially for you guys here. And for those of you who are tuning in later on for the recording, we're excited to be able to be providing more opportunities like this. In fact, speaking of which, we'll have part 3 of our mental health series coming up on September 9th with Lisa Sumi. And she is a counselor. She's also a sport performance and mental health specialist out in California and Nevada. She works with a pro soccer team out there in Nevada, but she works with pro athletes, Olympians, and Olympic hopefuls. And she's going to be bringing a lot of great wisdom as well. I know one of the things she's going to be talking about is what mental health is and what it isn't, because we know it's a broad topic, but she'll be bringing a lot more than that. But we're excited to have her join us in just a couple of weeks. So that'll be, again, September 9th at 9 p.m. And you'll be getting information. Since you are on here, you're on our email list. So you'll hear of these opportunities as they continue to come. So that will be, bringing our mental health series to a close, although I am sure it'll continue to come back around because it's such an important topic and there's so many more things to be talked about. So I'm sure we'll do more of that, but we'll be turning the corner and talking about some different topics as well, like financial, financial aid. That's fun, right? Branding, recruiting. And actually, we're going to have a topic of how to take care of your physical body so that you can get to the next level and play long term. We have an athletic trainer who's been in that field for almost 30 years, who's now has been an assistant athletic director at Miami of Ohio, who will be joining us in September, who will be talking about that very topic. So we're just excited. I mean, we're going to be getting to bring all sorts of experts in that we'd love for you to join in and be part of that conversation. We've talked about we want you to become a part of this community. Like we talk about that. The whole purpose that we brought Next Level Athlete Advantage into existence is to be to connect you guys in community, to help you get to that next level and provide some life skills that are not only going to be beneficial as an athlete, but beyond your sport. And so we want you to get involved in our community. Again, it's a free community where we have resources like the ones that Chris and Laura and I have created it's the resources that Austin has mentioned, Brittany, our Olympian from last week. Again, resources that is in that free community, but you need to join the community in order to access them. So you can access those. Chris, I don't know, do you have that link that you can post in the chat? You'll also, if you go to our website at nextlevelathleteadvantage.com, there's a lot of buttons you can push there to join our community. And you'll be getting an email tomorrow for those of you who registered. You'll be getting an email tomorrow with this recording of this video, as well as a link to join. So there's plenty of opportunities for you to join the community, engage there. And it's so important to be able to have conversations, like Laura said, just to be able to bounce ideas off each other. And, when you learn these great skills, to be able to remind each other, hey, it doesn't seem like you're thinking right here. Let's talk about it. So it's just it's a great platform to be able to share, our common love of sport and wanting to be the best not only athlete, but person that we can be. So another opportunity for you as well, if you want to go to that next level of your sport and want to get more individual time with Chris, Laura, and I, and even some of our guests, there we do have a subscription option where you can become like a monthly subscriber, and with a little investment, you get you're going to get more individual attention from us and opportunities to be potentially a part of some elite mastermind groups where we have smaller groups of athletes to come together to talk about whatever it is you're walking through, some great topics to, again, take your performance to the next level. So, but become a part of our community and you can hear more of that. Again, we just want to be here for you, to walk alongside you, to be a support and mentor you along this incredible journey that you're on, because it's a special time. And if we can help alleviate some of the pressures and help you navigate, we want to do that for you. So, all right. I think that is it. Chris, we're glad that you're back. You notice he had to step out. He has a sick infant that he's had to help attend to. They have, so that's why he had to kind of step out for a bit. Right? That's part of life, right?
It's part of life. And this one will only settle on me. So the first one was only settling on mama, and this one is not the case. So.
Right.
Oh, yes.
But yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, we're glad that you were able to, he was still listening in, even though he wasn't able to be visually present. All right. Well, that is it for tonight. Again, we will have another webinar to finish out this 3-part mental health series for athletes on September 9th. We hope you can join us then. And again, feel free to share, like when you get the video, if there's people, athletes, coaches, athletic directors, you feel this could be a benefit to, please pass it along. Right? We want to be a resource for as many athletes as we can to help them in their journey. So now, Austin, I know you said that you're on social media. Is that the best place for them to get in touch with you? Or is there a way they can reach out to you if they ever want to get connected and potentially work with you?
Yeah, social media is good. I have a lot of engagement on social media. I think that's kind of taking over as the main form of communication for today's athletes at that level.
Okay.
But if I have a lot of people, my email is austhalc@gmail. So just the first 4 of my first and last, AUSTHALC@gmail.com. I'm very, very available through email or social media. I'm sure that you could get in contact with me one way or another. And then I'm always willing to do a free consultation with everybody and let them know what it is that they're getting into and what benefits they'll be able to reap from working with a mental performance coach, because it's just something that's not really well known, but it's different. It's the difference between a championship level team and the runner up. So
absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing, right? Even taking, I think that's a great distinction, because like you think about swimming, for instance, or even track and field, the difference between gold and silver is like what, 100th of a second potentially. And it's those attention to these things that can make all the difference in the world. So
yep. And I want to commend you all too. Your platform is awesome, and I think that it's going to explode, and it's going to help a lot of athletes that went through similar things to what we did. And I'm really excited to see where it's going to lead to, and I'm happy to be a small part of it for right now. So I'll definitely be a big fan, and this will be one of my new resources that I'll be adding to my list whenever I resource out to different teams and athletes and coaches. So
awesome. Well, thank
you so much, Austin.
Yeah, that means a lot. It really does. Well, thank you again for being here. You brought such gold here tonight, and I'm looking forward to getting to continue our partnership with you and sending people your direction as well. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for being here. And you all have a good night, and hopefully we'll see you on the platform or at the webinar in a couple of weeks. All right, take care.
Uh-oh. Did we have some
What's
people?
up?
Oh,
No.
I was just, last time I hopped off so fast and then everybody else stayed on. So I stayed